It's a new year, and now that we're past the let's dunk on Endwalker trend that every Final Fantasy YouTuber was in love with, I want to talk about how I'm still finding ways to have fun with the game for both me and my friends. It's at that point in the life cycle of the expansion where, yeah, you might be running out of things to do, but that's okay because I'm here to fix that with a list of things that have kept me in the game while having a good time. I want to get right into it with the first one, Bozja and Eureka. I'm tossing these two into the same category, and they're both referred to in the game as exploration zones. If you've never heard of them, they're basically large-scale open-world instances with a million different things to do, including tons of boss fates, unique spawning and aggro mechanics, special combat abilities that completely change the way that combat feels, and self-contained raid instances. Imagine running Savage with 48 players at the same time. And because both of them are super tied to the relic grinds for their expansions, lots of players are hanging out in them right now because, like you, they just want something fun to do and relics are nice to have. As for which one you should try first, that's pretty much up to you. They both have similarities and differences that I enjoy about each one. For example, Eureka has the really cool elemental relic armor, and while Bozja does have relic armor as well, I would say that it's not as unique even though you might still like it since it has a lot of references to Final Fantasy Tactics in 12. Bozja, on the other hand, is the best way to level from 71 to 90, so it's a great way to level the job while you're trying to do the relic at the same time. Bozja also has a really good story if you ask me, and I think it's a must play if you enjoy anything from the world of Ivalice and the games that take place there. Number 2 are the old relic weapons. This ties in perfectly with what we just talked about. Relic weapons are really fancy weapons that exist mainly to give you cool weapon glams that look crazier than pretty much anything else in the game. Every expansion has a relic weapon. They are progressed in tiers, so a relic weapon is really a series of weapons where you start with one and through a long quest, continuously upgraded until it reaches a final form. This means that you're really getting a few weapon glams for the job that you choose instead of just one. Relics are typically considered to be a pretty lengthy and daunting experience. They're meant to be done over the course of an expansion. That said, relics are sort of easier to get once they're not current content. While I don't have time to include guides for every relic in this video, I'll start off by saying that the anima relics from Heaven's Ward are super easy to get today. The Eureka and Bozja relics aren't that tricky, but they can definitely take a little more time. The same goes for the 2.0 Zodiac weapons. As of the making of this video, the Endwalker relics aren't finished, but they will be very soon and they're also super easy to get, even though they're not old. I recommend looking up YouTube videos and images to see which weapons look the most appealing to you for the jobs that you play. That's a great way to pick which quests to tackle first. Side note, a lot of people don't know that the crafters and gatherers also have relic tools. These are pretty great since not only are they gorgeous, crafters don't have any other options really for tool glams. These are it. They also have relevancy because they are typically equivalent to or close to as good as the best in slot fully melded crafting tools. This means that you can pretty much get these and not need any other tools until Dawn Trail, when we start leveling crafters and gatherers to 100. I'll just say, if you want best in slot, it is much faster to just craft the tools for yourself, assuming you have the materia to meld them. If you don't, relics might be the way to go instead of dropping millions on materia. Next up is mount grinding, specifically the expansion capstone mounts. The capstone mounts are special mounts that require you to have acquired every other mount from all the extreme trials in that expansion. Once you have them all, you'll be able to take a special quest to unlock the capstone mount. While I don't care too much for all of them, you should look for yourself to see which ones look cool to you. I really like the Shadowbringers and Stormblood mounts personally. If you like two-seater mounts, the Shadowbringers mount is a great option for that reason alone. If you're in a 90 job, you can pretty much solo most of the trials up until Stormblood. Even then, with the warrior, you can still get through a lot, but I'd recommend forming small parties to speed the process up drastically. Keep in mind that every trial has a totem, and you can trade in 99 of these for a mount if you aren't lucky enough to have it drop randomly before that point. For anything Shadowbringers and beyond, I do recommend having a party of at least 7 people. Just make sure to unsync before you start so that you can actually be level 90 in the case of the Shadowbringers trials. A lot of these trials also drop materials that can be a nice source of gil if you sell them. Don't forget to desync the weapons that drop too, because you can get even more materials from them. It's also worth noting that these materials can be turned into weapon glams if you're into that. Number 4 are the deep dungeons. They're a roguelike procedural experience where you enter a special dungeon that changes every time you enter it, with tons of floors trying to make it until the end without wiping. You can bring up to 4 people and have the ability to save every 10 floors. This means that you can stop playing and come back later. They can take a few hours to complete and have interesting mechanics not really experienced elsewhere in the game. We currently have 3 of them: Palace of the Dead in A Realm Reborn, Heaven on High in Stormblood, and Eureka Orthos in Endwalker. Palace has 200 floors while the others have 100. All 3 of them have titles for doing the entire dungeon solo without dying. These are some of the rarest titles in the game, held by less than 2% of the entire player base. They take a lot of work, so it's worth flexing if you have them. These deep dungeons also have some fun loot like mounts and unique weapon glams, so there's a little extra motivation to check them out if you need it. If you're seriously going to go for the solo clear titles, I do recommend setting aside a lot of time and maybe also using a guide unless you're set on doing it blind. It's not easy by any means, but it is doable. Number 5 is Glam. Now, Glamour isn't an actual quest in the game, and the only real unlock required is to just unlock Glamour Prisms so that you can actually apply the glamours to your items. That said, it is something that many players spend hours and hours on. Never underestimate the power of looking good while you're slaying primals, or just AFKing in Limsa. Even though I touched on Glam earlier with the relic weapons, there's a lot more to it than weapons. Good Glam is just fun to have, and there are all kinds of pieces for you to wear. Literally thousands of outfit combinations are possible with the Glamour system. All you have to do is unlock, buy, or craft the pieces that you need. If you're someone who has always stayed away from Glam because you feel like you have no sense of fashion, I got you covered. There's a website I like to use called the Glamour Collection. This is one of my favorite websites for Final Fantasy XIV, and is basically a place to showcase glams. Every glam that you click on will break down every single item used in addition to the dyes, as well as showing you dope photos of the outfit. It'll even tell you where to get the items and if they're paid or not on the Mog Shop. It also has a really extensive search system, so you can filter by job restriction, level, and even certain pieces, so if you know that you want to base an outfit around a certain top, you can use this. It's really hard to go wrong with Glam if you reference this to find outfits to try out. My advice is just to have fun with it and experiment, and be careful with the black and white dye because they are really expensive on the market board. Oh, and word of advice since we're talking about dye, make sure to stock up on some dye before Dawn Trail comes out. In Dawn Trail, we're getting an update that's allowing pieces to have 2 colors dyed at the same time, which means double the dye usage. So you might want to prepare before the prices skyrocket. Speaking of preparing, for number 6, we have Crafting and Gathering. I'll be honest, the first time I tried these out, I got kinda bored. I really wanted to be able to make all the kinds of fancy glamour items that I was interested in. It wasn't until I found the right resources that I was really able to get into it and enjoy it. It probably didn't help that I first tried learning when I wasn't caught up on the MSQ, and the story was just a lot more interesting than any crafting rotation. That's why it's a great time to try it out now, since there isn't much story to worry about. Now I know I might not be selling it well, but hear me out, because I love it now. When I want a house, I made it my mission to craft and otherwise earn every piece of furniture that I used. I can repair anywhere, craft raid gear and release and sell it for tons of gil, and make food and potions for my friends. It's even better when you work together, like my free company, who organized a collaborative workshop crafting session to speed up the process drastically. Workshop crafts typically involve hundreds of small crafts, so it can take a lot of work by yourself. The possibilities are really endless here, and while I don't have a guide for getting started yet anyway, I'd be happy to help in my Discord, link below if anyone needs assistance with getting started. Now number 7 is a little bit different, and it's events, and I don't mean the seasonal stuff like Fall Guys and Heaven's Turn. I'm talking about throwing your own events. My friends and I aren't in a static together, but we will still sometimes organize little events where we get together with some kind of goal. Usually content running related, but maybe a fun theme and some G-posing as well. As an example, my friends and I got together for a little Starlight party, where we all worked together to come up with Christmas glams and did a bunch of photo shoots while hanging out and playing together. You can mix and match ideas as you please, but the idea is just to get people to come together with a plan and have fun. If you don't have friends to do this with, try shouting in towns to find people interested in it. Or, come hang out with me in my Discord. I mostly have lurkers in there, but it would be cool to throw events for people looking for stuff to do. And in the spirit of community events, number 8 is player venues. These are some of my favorite things about Final Fantasy XIV. Because of the player housing system, many players have taken to hosting events and creating themed venues. If you check Party Finder at night, especially on the weekend, you'll find many places like nightclubs going on. That said, there's a whole bigger world to explore than just those. Did you know that a group of players have come together to make an in-game museum featuring every fish in the game? Or that we have a real theater that hosts plays and other performance acts regularly? There's a lot more than the typical RP spots like clubs and casinos, and hey, those can be fun too. I really like to check out designer homes myself, and a lot of designers love having visitors to show off their work. G-Post studios also exist, and are a great way to show off that glam and relic outfit that you definitely made, right? My word of advice for these though is to be kind. The community of players that hang out at these spots is a lot smaller than you think. Reputations can carry, and people will talk about you behind your back if you get into drama. So if you don't want to deal with that, just be nice and be careful, and you might even make some friends along the way. Number 9 brings us to rating, but specifically mine rating, aka minimum item level no echo. These are two duty finder settings that you can turn on when running content. Just keep in mind that no echo is called silence echo when you're looking for it. What they do is make it so that when you enter an instance, you're scaled down to the minimum possible item level that you need to enter. It also removes the echo, which is a buff that automatically applies to you in old content, which gives you extra health, damage, and healing. The point of this is to have fun with older fights, since if you're a newer player and have tried these encounters, they are probably a lot different and less punishing than they were at launch. These settings bring your damage down closer to what the fights might have felt like. It's not a perfect recreation, but if you combine this with the group willing to try a fight blind, it's a super fun way to learn about and experience many of the fights in the game. This is one of my absolute favorite things to do, and it's neat getting to experience many of the trials that veterans talk about loving. The same goes for Savage, of course. This is a great way to spend time with raiding friends if you want more to do outside of Endwalker, and there are plenty of enthusiasts who love running this stuff, so toss up a party finder to give it a shot. Last up at number 10 are the Ultimate Raids. Maybe this isn't a huge surprise, but for those of you who don't know, Ultimate Raids are the absolute hardest encounters in the game. We get about 1 or 2 per expansion and currently have a total of 5. These fights are marathons and usually contain a sequence of fights in order with no stopping, so you can be raiding for longer than 15 minutes with many mechanics being thrown at you with little room for error, at least in the newer ones. There is also no one syncing these, so you have to learn them properly to earn the special title and ultimate weapon that you get upon completion. Some of these weapons look amazing and are on par with relics. There are many resources and guides, and for some, this is the peak of combat in Final Fantasy XIV, so they run these often even if they've already gotten every weapon that they want, just because it's fun, and that's the whole point of this video, giving you fun things to do. Just keep in mind that doing an ultimate can take weeks if not months to complete. While it is possible to clear these in Party Finder, you may find it worth your time to try and join a static that's progressing at a pace that works for you. It's also a great bonding experience. I will say, if you're newer to high-end content, I don't recommend jumping right into ultimates, but that's not to say that it's impossible to do it even if you haven't done things like Extremes or Savage. There's just a lot to learn, so be ready for that. And now I know that I said that there would only be 10. Here's a bonus if you made it this far. PvP. If you haven't tried PvP in Final Fantasy XIV yet, I strongly encourage you to give it a shot. Personally, I love PvP a lot in this game, especially in Frontlines and Rival Links. It really feels like many of the jobs get to fulfill their thematic fantasy way better than they can in PvE. Imagine being a black mage and putting an entire team to sleep before freezing them in place. Or maybe being a monk zipping around the battlefield kicking people around. And then there's white mage, which has a giant laser beam? The kits are all really wacky, unique, and not too complicated, with most of them having around 7 to 9 skills at the most. You just have to be okay with losing because it's PvP, and unlike a raid boss, you can't know what others are going to do every single time, so it's a much different experience, and one that you might find off-putting at first. Many people do, and that's okay. If you stick with it, and maybe use some of the guides that I'm going to be sharing pretty soon, I know that you'll be able to have a good time. There are also many PvP Discords available, and they host regular events for all of the modes. Even some events that are only for newer players. I recommend doing some digging, but I plan on putting together a list to help you find these. I'll share it in my Discord once it's all together. And now really at the end. Thanks so much for making it this far. I really want to keep making useful and helpful videos so that people can enjoy the game more. If you like the vibe, I hope that you stick around for the next video. Take it easy.